afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and I'm back for day 7 of a Victorian poetry afternoon. And I'm really excited to introduce you to this poet today. I think she sounds really, really interesting. I'm kind of breaking my own rules a little bit because there's no short poem by her, but because she sounds just so cool, we're just going to do the first 4 stanzas of one of her longer poems that I read the whole of last night, so I kind of have an idea of the whole thing. So this is Adelaide Anne Procter, and she was born in 1825, and like we were talking about recently about the kind of eminent Victorians liking to hang out together, she was definitely part of an existing literary circle in that she was kind of born into one. So her dad was an author and her mum was apparently admired for her wit and intelligence, which just speaks volumes about the different opportunities that were available to men and women at the time, which is kind of what Adelaide then went on to focus her work on. So through her dad, she came to know a certain gentleman named Charles Dickens, and a lot of her early poetry was published in Household Words and All the Year Round, which were 2 periodicals that were run by Dickens. Interestingly for me, Household Words is where North and South was published, which I read most of this week, and also Hard Times, which is the Dickens that I'm listening to it as an audiobook. So I feel like I'm having a Household Words themed Victober. But this poem that we're going to talk about was actually published in a separate little poetry book called Legends and Lyrics from 1861. But apart from getting to know Dickens and working on her literary work, Adelaide Anne Procter was also quite politically motivated. And I'm just going to read, actually no, I won't read it, but basically she was friends with a lot of prominent feminists at the time, and she really threw herself into a lot of work with the sick and poor and trying to focus on women's employment and women's opportunities. And I think that's a theme that comes across in the poem, but not the bit that we're going to talk about. She made efforts to support the training of women compositors, I guess that means like writers, and sold her poetry to benefit a Catholic refuge for homeless women. So all around, like kind of like classic Victorian do-gooder, but with like extra feminist action, making her all the more awesome and cool. Unfortunately, in typical Victorian style, she died of consumption in 1864, so she didn't even reach, if I've added it up right, she didn't even reach 40 years old, which is quite sad, and you have to wonder what more she could have done if she hadn't had tuberculosis. So, the poem that I'm going to read from is called Phillip and Mildred. It is a longer poem, but like I think I said, I just thought she was a really interesting character and it was really worthwhile sharing her story. So I'll just read a tiny bit from the introduction so that you get an idea of what the whole poem is about. In narrating the story of a man who leaves his fiancée to seek fame in London, the poem probes and gently criticises the notion of separate spheres, the idea of private-public worlds as female-male, mapping the damage done to a human relationship partly by the confines in which Mildred lives. Philip may seek his fortune in the public world, Mildred has only her weary duties, cold and formal, back at home. Procter, nonetheless, is careful not to make the poem a merely blunt or monologic attack on the curtailing demands of domesticity. Dramatising questions of gender politics through their effect on 2 individual lives placed on either side of a town-country split, the poem offers the city as a space where identities may change and the countryside as one of stasis. Cast in language of unaffected simplicity and with reassuringly regular metricality, Phillip and Mildred engages with politicised ideas of human relationships and gender roles and invites its reader to feel their force. And it does that really beautifully. So Mildred essentially has to wait at home while her fiancé tells her, oh, you know, I'm going to come back soon, but I just need to, like, I've got so much like potential and energy behind me, I just need to go into town and I need to like learn a couple of things and start a business there or something. And he moves from the countryside to the town, and as he does so, he changes completely as a person. And it's the kind of themes that you can see, I guess, in something like Great Expectations, where Pip becomes a completely different person as different things in his life change. But Mildred is forced by her circumstances to stay the same. So that when they are eventually reunited, their relationship is not what it was, and although they are bound together in honour, the love that they have for one another has faded and failed. It is a very sentimental work, but it fits into the pattern of Victorian sentimentality, and there's a little bit more in the introduction. Reading the past requires cherishing the idea of difference. Sentimentality, like the practices of melodrama, plays an important role in the complex patterns of Victorian aesthetics, and its occasions deserves our understanding as they require our imaginative sympathy. So basically, we shouldn't dismiss something just because it's sentimental fiction or sentimental poetry, because that was something that was very important to the Victorians, and something that we need to understand if we want to understand what Victorian literature and writing was kind of about, I suppose. So I'm just going to read the first 4 stanzas, which are set in this kind of like nighttime scene of parting between the lovers. And if you should want to, I will try to find a link to the full text version. Lingering, fade the rays of daylight, and the listening air is chilly. Voice of birds and forest murmur, insect hum and quivering spray stir not in that quiet hour. Through the valley, calm and stilly, all in hushed and loving silence, watch the slow departing day. Till the last faint western cloudlet, faint and rosy, ceases blushing, and the blue grows deep and deeper where one trembling planet shines, and the day has gone forever. Then, like some great ocean rushing, the sad night wind wails, lamenting, sobbing through the moaning pines. Such of all days' changing hours is the fittest and the meetest for a farewell hour, and parting looks less bitter and more blest. Earth seems like a shrine for sorrow, nature's mother's voice is sweetest, and her hand seems laid in chiding on the unquiet, throbbing breast. Words are lower, for the twilight seems rebuking sad repining, and wild murmur and rebellion, all as childish and in vain, breaking through dark future hours, clustering starry hopes seem shining, then the calm and tender midnight folds her shadow round the pane. Which I think is a beautiful setup for a scene of farewell, and it's very deliberately described as and illustrated to be a setup for that scene of farewell. Even before you know anything about Phillip and Mildred and the couple, the author has very carefully told you what she is about to do. She has said, where is it? Yeah. It's the fittest and the meetest for a farewell hour. So she's foreshadowing quite early on what is going to be happening. She is also foreshadowing the end of the poem as well. So the idea that their love will be gone forever ties in really well with the very early scene of the day has gone forever, and like watching the slow departing day, and you get this idea that the day is the time when they were happy together, and the time when things, I suppose, were maybe simpler because he hadn't had this idea of going out into the world and seeking his fame and fortune, and they were just going to be like happily married and living like a normal couple would. She is very strong on using not exactly personification. I guess if you're going to say that the wind is wails, lamenting and sobbing, then yeah, that is personification, but using description of natural moments and natural images to illustrate the idea of emotional pain and suffering. So like I've said, lamenting, sobbing, moaning, earth seems like a shrine for sorrow, so the kind of like the sanctity of night in a way, the quietness, the stillness, in a slightly pagan sense, opening it out as a time in which this emotional experience can be undergone. And I guess it makes it more, what she's saying is, it makes it more kind of like special and important to have this parting scene at night, compared to if they had parted during the day, when there might be like other things going on and noise and bustle and so on. There would be voice of bird and forest murmur, insect hum and quivering spray. I don't know what she means by quivering spray. Maybe like grass quivering, a spray of grass. I don't know. Whereas because it is so quiet at night, the relationship between the couple really takes centre stage, and makes it itself seem more important. Yeah, I really enjoyed the emphasis on natural imagery that she used here. When I read the whole poem, I did get like quite a strong emotional response from it. It's that kind of like that feeling that you can see it happening and you can see what's going to go wrong and you really, really don't want it to, but you can't see any way of preventing it. And I think that is what she's trying to convey, because the characters kind of probably know they're doing wrong, or they know that things aren't going to work out well for them, but they're kind of this hoping for the best. And there is a bit just at the end where she spells it out in a verse, and I'll just read that verse. Sad it may be to be longing, with a patience faint and weary, for a hope Sorry, speech is hard. Sad it may be to be longing, with a patience faint and weary, for a hope deferred, and sadder still to see it fade and fall. Yet to grasp the thing we long for, and with sorrow sick and dreary then to find how it can failest, is the saddest pain of all. So she's saying it almost would have been better for Mildred if her hope of ever being married to Philip had just faded away, rather than what happens in the poem is they do get married, but that marriage is not at all what either of them could have hoped for. Yeah, it's sad. It works for the Victorian sentimentality thing, but I feel like this is a bit of a partial reading because we haven't read the whole thing. I did time reading the whole thing, but it took me 15 minutes, and I've said I don't want any of these videos to be any longer than 15 minutes because I feel like that's more than long enough for me to ramble about poetry that I know nothing about. I'm just going to read it again so that you can hopefully enjoy that lovely natural imagery again, and then we'll look at who's tomorrow's poet. Lingering fade the rays of daylight, and the listening air is chilly. Voice of bird and forest murmur, insect hum and quivering spray stir not in that quiet hour. Through the valley, calm and stilly, all in hushed and loving silence, watch the slow departing day, till the last faint western cloudlet, faint and rosy, ceases blushing, and the blue grows deep and deeper where one trembling planet shines, and the day has gone forever. Then, like some great ocean rushing, the sad night wind wails, lamenting, sobbing through the moaning pines. Such, of all days' changing hours, is the fittest and the meetest for a farewell hour, and parting looks less bitter and more blest. Earth seems like a shrine for sorrow, nature's mother's voice is sweetest, and her hand seems laid in chiding on the unquiet, throbbing breast. Words are lower, for the twilight seems rebuking sad repining and wild murmur and rebellion as all childish and in vain. Breaking through dark future hours, clustering, starry hopes seem shining. Then the calm and tender midnight folds her shadow round the pane. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. I like this poem, and I like that she uses a longer line length than any of the poems that we've read so far, and that means that although there is a rhythm, it's less sing-song, it's less constraining, and there's more scope for interaction between the lines and sort of rhymes within the lines and so on. But I don't want to go too much into all of that kind of stuff when I don't know what I'm talking about. So the poet for tomorrow is George Meredith, if he's got a shorter poem, which I'm not sure if he does, but we shall find out. Okay, take care everyone.